Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the Mammon MSc Community Forum. We've had a couple great, a couple great days of presentations and a couple more really interesting panels in front of us this afternoon before we transition into celebrations. So again, thank you to all the family, friends, supporters, community sponsors, stakeholders who are in the audience today, either in the room or on Zoom. We're so glad that you've made the effort to be here, and thank you for all you've invested in our students. I want to take just a moment to thank the folks who've been essential behind the scenes support to pull off this 3-day adventure. So can I get Lindsay, program facilitator for both graduate programs, Jillian Bauer, come on over. Jillian's our chief of staff for the Clark School. And where's Ricardo? Ricardo Vasquez, one of our MEM faculty. It is a ton of work to put together these presentations and provide support to our students throughout. And as a thank you from the program, we have some gift certificates for massage or other wellness packages, which I think will be much needed after this week. So, Ricardo?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And if you see these folks later on in the day, please express your gratitude because this would not be possible without them. Okay, let's get into it. So it is a privilege and a pleasure to introduce Lia, Tessa, Matthew, and Jad, who will be speaking to a panel presentation entitled Roots, Enhancing Soil and Watershed Health Through Community Engagement.
Hi, thanks for coming to our presentation. I think I speak for all of us when I say that we're a little bit nervous, but also really excited to share our work with you guys. I'm Lia.
I'm Tessa.
Matthew.
I'm Jad.
So why did we pick roots as our theme? Well, when I think of roots, I think of connection, I think of community, I think of grounding. I think of the vast subterranean networks where plants communicate with one another and with other organisms. But how often do we really think about what's below our feet? In the display behind us, these images show roots displayed front and center as chandeliers that take over entire rooms. While plants have these vast interwoven communication systems and deep ties to the land around them, humans have really lost touch with such connections. Our projects have worked in different ways to reconnect each other and our connection to the land, and to strengthen our relationships so that communities, both seen and unseen, can thrive into the future.
So similar to these unseen roots, through our discussions, we have found that our projects also share these hidden connections, and we've identified these 5 words that flow throughout all of our projects: resilience, regeneration, reciprocity, relationships, and rekindling. And more specifically, each of us have identified 2 of these words that relate most closely to our projects. We want to share those with you. So I chose relationships and reciprocity. Much of my project has been focused on relationships with self, relationships with the community, and relationships with the surrounding environment. And I believe that when we foster these relationships, we begin to understand what it truly means to live in reciprocity with the environment. And I've been doing this work through enhancing outdoor and environmental education as well as community engagement.
The words that apply to my project are resilience and regeneration. By encouraging the use of regenerative practices, my project seeks to increase resiliency in soils and on a larger scale in food systems.
My words are rekindle and regeneration. Climate change is a crisis of externalities. Business as usual externalizes costs onto public health and the environment through legislative loopholes. There is no waste in nature, and if we connect and reconnect our wastes to raw materials, we rekindle a neglected relationship with the material world, and in the process, regenerate communities of humans and more than human beings.
Oh, where is it? Go back. Yep. The two words that closely match my projects are relationships and regeneration, because in ecosystems and in nature itself, there's no one without the other. My project wants to rebridge the connection between humans and soil through the proper relationship and regeneration, because this is what we all need.
With that said, our presentations will start with Lia Cristadoro. Her project focuses on watershed health and community engagement by emphasizing the importance of inclusivity and cross-cultural collaboration.
Awesome, thank you. Oops, clicker. Yeah, so before I begin, I just want to give you guys a little bit of backstory. When I was a child, I remember having such a fond fascination and wonder for the natural world. I had an awe for everything that it had to offer, and I was excited to explore more of it. But when I was in the classroom, I didn't really feel like this part of myself was, being recognized and cared for in the way that I would hope. And so as I've gotten older, I've realized that it's important that we can offer this to children moving forward in our communities in order to help them build more resilient communities, especially given the world that we're living in. I believe that the way we learn about and experience the environment is integral in the relationship that we build with it. So for the past year, I've been working to enhance inclusivity and cross-cultural collaboration in Telluride Institute's Watershed Education Program. So the Telluride Institute is a nonprofit located in Telluride, Colorado. It was established in 1984. Since the beginning, it's been focused on identifying and exploring the connections between art, science, and education. And center at this has been people, place, and the planet. Last April, I was offered the opportunity to take over the Watershed Education Program as the director. And so I've been trying to find ways to build upon this program. Historically, it's been focused on the ecological, environmental, hydrological, physical components of the San Miguel watershed. And they've collaborated with local and regional schools for like 30 years now. However, looking at the past of this program, it's been exceptional, but I really wanted to build upon it and make it, more progressive for the future. And so what I realized is that there's a lack of collaboration with local and regional stakeholders. There's a broken kinship and connection with nature within our community, which has led to, minimal recognition of cultural and experiential knowledge. So Western science and research has really been at the forefront. And then alongside this, WEP has only really functioned in the fall and spring seasons and a little bit in the winter. So I really wanted to make it more year-round. I wanted to create progressive, thoughtful curriculum that focused on food, water, energy systems, as well as climate change. And to do this, I need to seek out more collaborative projects with these local and regional stakeholders, prioritize relationships instead of transactional opportunities, which we so often see in nonprofit work. And then I wanted to, also add a piece of service-based learning and community service. It's really hard to understand reciprocity and build a relationship if you're not out there, like with your hands in the dirt, dealing with the land. But before I entered into this process, I wanted to establish some core values, and they're listed right here. I think the ones that speak the most to me are kinship, diversity and equity and inclusion, and connection to nature. Those have really spoke to me throughout the process of this project. My project timeline was, it began in summer of 2022, then moved into the fall and winter, and now I'm finishing it up in the spring and summer. So for the summer of 2022, these are the three things that I chose to focus on. I wanted to do a first round of curriculum development, build these relationships and engage more stakeholders, and then also transform the strategic plan. So for my first phase of curriculum development, I really stuck with food, water, energy systems. And I was still kind of stuck in this mindset of, place-based environmental education, but it was still really rooted in, Western science and research. So, this was my first iteration, and some of this has continued on into the rest of the project, but I've also changed some things, which we'll talk about later. And then for relationship building and stakeholder engagement, I had some collaborations with local organizations, Telluride Academy, the Pinhead Institute, and then this was new, Telluride Mushroom Festival, which has never had WEP involved before, which was exciting. I can't go through the whole transformed strategic plan, that would take a while, but I just wanted to highlight the new mission and vision. Both really prioritize having the San Miguel Watershed as a place-based teaching tool, and to have this goal of a sustainable future for future generations. And what that looks like is including more cultural, social, historical, and economic components, not just physical or science-based components. So then as we moved into the fall and the winter, this might have been my favorite part of the project because there was so much collaboration that went on. But I focused on the WEP fall field studies, cross-cultural and collaborative projects, and then another round of curriculum development. So for the WEP fall field studies, I worked with local and regional schools. I took students on field trips anywhere from kindergarten through the end of high school. And these are the trips that we took. And then these were the stakeholders that I worked with. So some of them were specialists on these trips or collaborators or contributors, which was awesome. It made these experiences for the children really collaborative to teach them that part of environmental work. And then some of the cross-cultural and collaborative projects I participated in were some of these. Some of these I was just joining into for the experience, and some of them I actually planned on my own, which was exciting. Which one of those is the Ute Youth Ski Day. The Ute Youth Ski Day has been a part of the Telluride Institute for years, but I really wanted to build upon it this year and have more students participate. And I'm excited to say that we had, I think, 32 total participants from the Ute, Mountain Ute, and Southern Ute tribes, which is more than we've had in any other year. And for this event, they got to ski on the resort, which was really fun. We made like a video for one of, so actually, let me point this out. But in the top right corner for you guys, that's Bird Red. He was in this ski film, Spirit of the Peaks. Some of you may have seen it before. It's about Connor Ryan, who is an Indigenous backcountry skier, and it talks a lot about this idea of reciprocity. And Bird is actually a musician, and he was on this trip, and we held this film at Mountain School. So the Ute Youth participants were there, kids from Mountain School, other people in the community all came to watch this film. And then down the road, we made a video of the ski day, and it had his music in it. So that was really exciting. But yeah, it was awesome. Sorry. Okay, for my second round of curriculum development, I kind of wanted to mix things up. I wanted to take components of what I had changed in the earlier months, but make it more local, make it more focused on psychology and community and like these deeper ideas that we don't always explore in education. So these are some of the trips I created. You can see on the bottom, one of them is connection with nature and Zen ecology. And I'm actually offering this trip for not only students, but teachers like outside of the classroom, so they can find ways to bring this to their students. And then in the spring and summer of 2023, which I'm kind of in the process of this part of my project right now, I am going to conduct WEP Springfield studies again and do more cross-cultural and collaborative projects. And so this is kind of what's on the list right now. It hasn't happened yet, but plans that we're making with collaborators and stakeholders. So I'll be conducting these field studies again. Right now, I'm going to be working with a teacher who we've never worked with before. She runs the health and wellness program for the middle school and high school, and she wants to take the connection with nature trips so we can talk about things like eco-anxiety and help kids understand what that looks like and the role it plays in their lives. And then I am also going to be participating in Telluride Valley Floor Day, which is an annual event It's been happening for years now too. It's run by Pinhead. They hold stations on the valley floor, which is a really valuable place in our community. And kids get to learn about things uh, like insects and forest health and all kinds of things that's different nonprofits offer to help with. But this year I'm going to be adding a station. It's going to be focused on reciprocity and connection with nature. And then the cross-cultural and collaborative projects that I am planning to do is I will be running a week-long camp with the Pinhead Institute focused on agriculture in the region and what that means for our community. I am also creating a new trip with the Ute Mountain Ute and Southern Ute tribes, and it'll be a summer recreation event focused on reciprocity. And we'll be working with Seas of Trees as well. They work to plant trees in the region, and we felt like that was a good way for students to be able to give back and learn more about that. And then I'll be working with Telluride Academy and Mushroom Festival again. And then I just wanted to highlight, this was an exciting part of my work, is there were people who were quite interested in what I was trying to do with the Watershed education program. And so they wrote papers about Telluride Institute's work, about the Watershed education program. I got to write a few blog posts. And I feel like that's really helped the community connect with what our mission and vision is. But I think the lessons I've learned through my project goes past logistics and things like that. I want to highlight 3 words: reciprocity, biophilia, and kinship. Reciprocity is the constant give and take between ourselves and the environment or relationships we have with people. And it's helped me realize through conversations with different communities and different cultures that knowledge can truly be gained through spiritual, experiential, and generational knowledge, not just through Western science and research. And there has to be a place for this in education. And when we foster reciprocity, we are better able to understand one another and our shared lands more deeply. Okay, next is biophilia. Biophilia is the innate love that humans have for all of life and living things. It's a part of our DNA, it's a part of our evolution. This needs to be explored in childhood, or it can be lost as we get older. Children need the ability to have free play and free thinking to really grow internally and understand their own personal connection with the environment. I want to encourage more children to embrace creativity, critical thinking, and individuality when they participate in these trips. Lastly is kinship, and I believe kinship is when reciprocity and biophilia come together within an individual. It is the idea of understanding our familial relationships with the places we call home. And this is what truly motivates us to nurture and protect the sacred. I mean, without this, there's a missing piece to environmental stewardship. And I believe it restores balance to help us create truly resilient communities. So what are the next steps for me? I have accepted a full-time position as the director of the Watershed Education Program. So that's how I'm able to continue my project into the summer and into following years. I want to focus this next year on building more reciprocity, biophilia, and kinship within the program, within myself, within the community. I also want to integrate more tools from environmental psychology. I was lucky enough to take a course on this past winter, and it really opened my eyes to, we can ask people to participate in the environment and help, but in order to do that, they have to have their own relationship. And then I want to balance Western science and research with cultural knowledge and traditional ecological knowledge. There has to be a place for both, and they have to be valued equally. So I will be adding programming around art, storytelling, critical thinking, meditation, reflection, and attention restoration. I wanted to say thank you to all these people, especially the Telluride Institute Environmental Studies team, Rick Shavoya, Regina Lopez White Skunk, who's also a student in our program, Kaya White Skunk, Virgil Morgan, and so many others. I also really want to say thank you to my advisor, Dr. Brooke Zanatel. Without her, I couldn't have made this project happen. And I'm also super thankful for my Telluride cohort. I think we set out on this mission that we had no idea what it was going to look like, being the first to do this remote program, and we've all had so much success. But the last thing I want to leave you guys with is this quote by Robin Wall Kimmerer. I think it really highlights the greater implications of my project and my hopes for outdoor environmental education as well as community engagement. Each person, human or no, is bound to every other in a reciprocal relationship. Just as all beings have a duty to me, I have a duty to them. If an animal gives its life to feed me, I am in turn bound to support its life. If I receive a stream's gift of pure water, then I am responsible for returning a gift in kind. An integral part of a human's education is to know these duties and how to perform them. Thank you.
We have time for a few questions.
Yeah.
Fantastic presentation, Leah.
Thank
I
you.
was curious if you could just elaborate a little bit more on what bringing this reciprocity into the classroom kind of looks like, or what you're hoping it looks like.
Yeah. So I think there's I'll repeat the question, sorry. Sean was asking like what bringing reciprocity into the classroom would actually look like. I think there's a number of ways to do this, and I am still exploring that because there's a lot of routes that you can take. But that's why I think that community service piece is huge, like being able to get outside and learn about something in your community and like truly be helping your community is something that you can bring back into the classroom and talk about, or even do in the classroom. I also think a lot of the kids I work with are really little and they're bombarded with information all day that it's hard to take time for them to relax and understand themselves and understand what's happening in the world around them. So adding in reciprocity and giving back and connection as a part of their development, I think just like helps them bring that through their whole education.
Anyone else?
Yes.
How did you learn about the concept of biophilia?
Yeah, so the question was, how did I learn about the concept of biophilia? I just want to note that a lot of what I've spoken about today has been given to me through conversations with community members in different cultures. Like, so a lot of this has been compiled through discussions that I've had, not like really from any curriculum or anything, but in the class that I took, I learned a lot about biophilia and the actual like psychological pieces of these terms and what they mean and how they function in our world. But yeah, I think mainly through discussions and conversations. Thanks. Cool. And I'm really excited for you guys to hear about Tessa's presentation next. Hers is also in the San Miguel Watershed.
Hi, everyone. Again, I'm Tessa Lightfoot, and my project is also focused in San Miguel County. Most of my work occurred on the west end of the county in Norwood area, so it's a much more rural and agricultural part of the county. But the focus was on a payment for ecosystem service project, specifically focused on incentivizing farmers to improve soil health. First, I just wanted to acknowledge the stakeholders and people involved in my project. Not listed here is Chris Hazen, who is my community sponsor and was really essential in the success of this project, and he kind of oversees the whole thing. Additionally, San Miguel County and the Colorado Water Conservation Board provided funding for the project, as well as many other stakeholders who were involved and will be into the future. To give you all a bit of background, I think we're all aware that climate change is impacting ecosystems around the world and food systems specifically. In recent years, studies have shown the importance of building and maintaining healthy soils to create more resilient food systems, improve human and ecosystem health, and combat climate change. Soils have a promising role in climate change mitigation because they are a carbon sink, so they store carbon that would otherwise be released into the atmosphere. Many of us know this as carbon sequestration, and this process has the potential to reduce atmospheric greenhouse gases, slow the rate of global temperature rise, and mitigate climate change. But soil carbon is also important for soil health itself. Soil organic carbon is important to maintain soil structure, soil aeration, and nutrient and water retention. Keeping soil organic carbon above its threshold level is essential to the health of these ecosystems. So while unfortunately many of our traditional agricultural practices have degraded soil health, agriculture can also be used as a tool to restore and rebuild robust soil ecosystems. Through restoration of our agricultural soils, we can increase global food security, improve soil quality, and increase carbon sequestration while also maintaining the livelihoods of farmers and ranchers. So my project largely focuses on ecosystem services, which maybe not everyone is familiar with, but essentially they're the benefits that we derive from functioning ecosystems. The Millennium Ecosystem Assessment has further broken these down into 4 categories: provisioning, regulating, cultural, and supporting services. And while many ecosystem services may be just in one of these categories, agriculture falls into all 4. So it's a really essential thing to continue working on. So payment for ecosystem services are essentially ways to quantify and assign a monetary value to the benefits provided and then compensate people who enhance or maintain those services. So these programs are essentially where financial incentives are used to encourage land managers to improve ecosystem services. And in the agricultural sector, this can look like increasing resiliency by providing financial and technical assistance to farmers as they transition their practices to ones that promote soil health. In San Miguel County, there's a history of payment for ecosystem service programs beginning in 2010. This program was more focused on the protection of rare plants on private land, and it was a great success and inspired the county to expand their goals to other environmental targets, including soil health. So the focus changed to studying the impact of compost amendments on soil health and other nutrient amendments. And that program lasted a little while, but did kind of fizzle out. And then in 2018, the county received a grant from the Colorado Water Conservation Board that revitalized the payment for ecosystem service program. But again, the focus changed back to soil health and water conservation specifically. So that's where I jumped in 2021. We began a new pilot program focused on soil health and specifically modeled after the California Healthy Soils program. The goal of the current program is to increase carbon sequestration and improve soil health. So the county is actually hoping to use the carbon stored, use those credits to offset their emissions throughout the county. We partner with local farmers and ranchers in San Miguel County, and we provide financial support to help them adopt more sustainable practices, and we help them throughout that process. Again, this program is funded by San Miguel County, as well as that Colorado Water Conservation Board grant that I mentioned before. The tools we utilize in this program are really from the NRCS, and first and most importantly are the conservation practices that they provided as a part of their EQUIP program, which is an environmental quality incentives program. Rather than reinventing a bunch of conservation practices to use for the PEZ program, we use these ones that already are outlined and have guidelines that are known and well established. We also use the Comet Planner tool, which is a publicly available tool to calculate the amount of carbon stored based on what practices you implement and the amount of acreage you're working with. So I just wanted to break down the process of what I've been doing a bit farther. I think that most of the MEM projects are really focused on community connection and relationship building. So we do start with boots on the ground, meeting with landowners, talking to them about their practices, viewing their property, and observing both what they're currently doing and what they have the potential to do on their property. Then we come back to the office and I map their property with the different conservations they're currently implementing or have the potential to implement. And that's using the county's GIS online platform, which is a pretty basic version of GIS, but really does the job for what I'm doing. Then I generally create an operating plan using the conservation services, the conservation practices from the NRCS, and I kind of explain how their current management practices are in line with those or have the potential to be. We then calculate the amount of carbon stored and the payments. We calculate the payments for each farmer, get the contract signed and distribute that money to them. And then in 2022, we did also conduct free soil tests for those producers who wanted it. I just wanted to give you guys a bit of an idea of one of the maps that I made. So you can see here that in each color is a different conservation practice that has been implemented. So that large orange area is prescribed grazing. There are several different plots that are all prescribed grazing because that can look like a lot of different things. They've got chickens grazing in some areas, they've got cows grazing in some areas. So they have some different practices even within that larger category of prescribed grazing. Then they also have nutrient management, tree and shrub establishment, and critical area planting. This is one of the more basic maps that I've made, but I think it gives you an idea of what they look like. To take a step back, maybe most of you don't know about the NRCS conservation practices, but the ones that we work with most commonly are prescribed grazing. You can see that we have almost 2,000 acres under prescribed grazing. So that is 90% of the acreage we have under contract is grazed. That's followed by range planting, nutrient amendments, mulching, cover crop, critical area planting, and many more. To highlight some of the results of the project, again, year one, 2021 was really the pilot year for this, and we were laying the foundation for what this program would look like. We were beginning to establish relationships with people in the community and getting the word out for what we were trying to accomplish. So we started with 3 landowners, and those were largely friendly actors who had the concept of regenerative agriculture and kind of understood the mission, or maybe were already actively involved in it. Between the 3 landowners, we had 600 acres under contract, which resulted in 135 tons of CO2 equivalent sequestered and roughly $33,000 paid to producers. In year 2, 2022, we doubled the number of landowners and the amount of carbon sequestered, and we more than tripled the number of acres under contract. That resulted in roughly $40,000 being paid to producers. The reason you don't see such a big jump in the money distributed is because we did create a cap per landowner of how much money would be allocated so that we could ensure that there was enough to go around for everyone. Next steps, I'm really looking forward to what 2023 has to hold. We have established a partnership with the Chavno Conservation District, which is the soil conservation district that San Miguel County is a part of. And we are excited to be contracting Dave Deerstein, who is going to be a technical service provider for us. And so he'll be accompanying us on all of our site visits. And he has a really vast knowledge of soil science and a background in both soil health and soil science. So we'll be establishing baselines on all properties, and that will look like soil mapping, vegetative surveys, as well as more extensive soil sampling. And so once we have these baselines established, we can better track progress going forward to see that we're really getting results through this program. Additionally, with his knowledge and expertise, we'll be able to create recommendations for each landowner going forward, so we can kind of create a plan for each property. I think as a result, the whole program will have a lot more legitimacy and really be achieving the goals of the program to both sequester carbon and get new carbon in the ground, and also improve soil health. And with all of that, we also will hope to increase the number of producers to 9 or 10. So we'll be adding another third, and then we're hoping to get larger landowners involved throughout the process. Finally, I just wanted to give final thanks to Chris Hazen and my advisor, Dr. Zanatel, as well as all of the PEZ participants. This program literally would not exist if those landowners hadn't been willing to take a leap of faith and be a part of this project.
Questions?
Great job. It was really enjoyable and it sounds like you did some really cool work. I guess I was curious about like kind of two questions. So bear with me. First question is, how did you get in contact with the landowners? And also, can you kind of describe the relationship and working with them? Because this is something our organization is trying to do as well, right? And it's like, how do you come onto someone's property and say, no, this is better? Obviously in a much more professional way. Yeah, so I was wondering if you could talk about that kind of spectrum.
So the question was, how did we know and reach out to landowners? And then how do we work on those relationships and maintain them in a positive way?
Yeah.
Essentially, so San Diego County is pretty small and the agricultural community is pretty small as well. So Chris Hazen, my community sponsor, is pretty well known in the community and has a lot of existing connections. There are a handful of farmers and ranchers who have regenerative practices on their mind. So those were the first people that we contacted because we wanted to start with people who would be a little more flexible as we worked through the kinks and who were kind of rooting for us from the beginning. So we definitely were working with friendly actors to start off with. And our strategy going forward, something we've been talking about because, you know, at a certain point, you're trying to get to people who aren't already into regenerative agriculture, and that's the whole point. So one thing we've been doing is working with farmers who are trusted in the community and who have a voice, and they can start talking about it within the community. So it's not just us coming in from Telluride saying, hey, we know better than you do. And so one of our strategies this year is we're working with one property owner, Sagen, who is surrounded by a bunch of other farmers. And so we're kind of using him as an example, being like, hey, we're working with Sagen. We'd love to work with you. Let's go have some beers and talk about it. So I think starting out, just building the relationship and not immediately coming into it with a list of recommendations has been really important and will be into the future.
Okay, so I'm really interested. So I work in corporate sustainability and innovation for sustainability, and I'm really interested in sort of the emergence of climate of carbon exchange and carbon markets. And I'm wondering if there's an opportunity, or if you all explored actually selling into some of those offset programs for businesses.
We haven't gotten to that point yet. We're still really developing the program, and I think the county is hoping to use the carbon credits for their own offsets. So I don't think it's expanding beyond that at this point. Like, this really is what the county, it's for their own credit offsets. So that's what we're headed towards right now.
Thank you.
We'll have time for more questions at the end of the panel. Thank you so much.
Next, I'd like to introduce Matthew, who will be diving deeper into soils with the application of biochar.
All right. Hello, my name is Matthew Eshed, and my master's thesis project is titled Characterizing Biochar for Use in Municipal, Agricultural, and Public Lands Settings. There are some artifacts from my project at the table in the back. You can look at the biochar. You can take some and put it in your pocket if you want. It will get all over you, as well as you can take a zine, which won't really get all over your body, but might get all over your mind. So feel free to take one, and if there are none, ask me if I can print one off for you. So the goal of my project was to see where biochar fits in the local ecosystem, to kind of demystify it. It's one of these carbon solution kind of things that's people are like, oh, solution, I love solutions. So I'm like, okay, well, hold on, what is it? Does it work? How do we use it? So we intentionally we're getting into making it using a scientific approach with an in-depth literature review, as well as an iterative approach where we're trying to do it really bad the first time so that we can do it a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better. And this contributes to the path forward for managing drought, wildfire fuels, storing carbon, and building community resilience. And it's meant to be a multimedia project where the science and the work are as important as the communication, and if we've communicated effectively and completely. So just to give a snapshot of where we are on the story arc of my life, from reciprocating saws, from New York to reciprocating saws, to 3D printers, to carbon products, to regenerative hemp, to yelling and protesting about park protection in New York City, to this. I'm biochar Matt now, and sometimes a spokesman for the university. So for some project context, these are the organizations that have a hand in the local biochar system here. There's intersections with fire ecology and fuels management, having to do with the bark beetle epidemic and all of that excess woody biomass that is in the forest and at the landfill. Climate change, drought. We are in the Colorado River Basin, where it's a responsibility for basically everybody in the basin to get better at managing our water and our soils. And our county has a robust sustainability plan that was put together by MEM graduate from last year, as well as we have PFAS and other chemicals in the water here, as well as all over the state and all over the country. So that's the context. There's also context in the school. Nate Gore, who's in the audience, hi Nate, and Todd Jesse are both past MEMers who studied biochar for their projects, which they both studied biochar in mine reclamation. And then there's also a good dynasty of compost research with Alexa Cooper, Sean McGrath, Dana Lehman, and Alexis Deploy, and many others. So before I tell you what biochar is, I'm going to tell you how popular it is. You can see on this chart that in 2010, there were about 100 papers published about biochar, and in 2020, there were about 5,000. So, and the top other terms going with it are soil remediation and water remediation. This paper title can kind of give you a sense of all of the different applications for biochar. I focused on soil and water and a bit of pollution remediation. So biochar is a portmanteau or a combined word of biology and charcoal. Charcoal is used for fuel, and biochar is not meant to be used for fuel. It's meant to be used as a filter medium or as an additive for soils. It has a lot of other uses because it's super high percentage carbon, at least 80% carbon. So it can replace things like carbon black in inks, and it can be used as an aggregate. It can be used as a insulation material for buildings. But again, I focused on it for soil because that seemed to be the most readily available application here in Gunnison. Here, Jad will talk a little bit more after about the terra preta soils, but this is kind of the inspiration for biochar comes from. The story, the mythology of this is that there are these terra preta, these dark earth soils found in the Amazon, and they are anthropogenic or human engineered soils where charcoal is added to the soil, and that charcoal or biochar has been used to absorb different waste products. We can think like human waste or animal waste as something that biochar can absorb, and then the nutrients will be added to the soil, making very fertile soils. Don't worry if you're not an organic chemist, but this chart shows of what pyrolysis is at a chemical level. Pyrolysis is a loosening through thermal breakdown in an oxygen-limited environment. So it's not combustion where you're turning your feedstock into ash, but you're getting a charcoal, biochar at the end, and you're quenching it right away. And the byproducts that you get through this cellulose or woody material to biochar is you're also getting an oil and gas that's coming off of it too. And so this is what we're going for. This is what holds on to the water. This is what holds on to the chemicals. This is what holds on to everything through adsorption with a D, adsorption. So I had a lot of deliverables for my project. This is just an overview of what I'm going to get into on the following slides. So first of all, we needed money in order to buy equipment so that we could move soil and make biochar and actually do this project. So we're really fortunate to have the wonderful community foundation here in Gunnison. We were able to get $4,000 from them that we used to buy bulk density sampling equipment, as well as these really crucial, try not to point the laser in my co-presenter's eyes, these kits here, which enable us to actually test the soil in our own lab, which is a new capacity for us. So that's exciting, as well as the pH meter and other kind of really critical tools for taking baseline soil samples. Also through the school, through the Haley Family Fund and the Integrative Public Lands Management Fund, as well as the MEM Fund, or the SRC, Sustainable and Resilient Communities Fund from Western. And also I had a research fellowship with Cold Harbor. So we got over $20,000 for the project, and that's really exciting since we're really trying to establish an ongoing program here. So as you can see here, I did a really comprehensive literature review that informed the rest of the work. It took me quite a while. I finished this in about September or October of last year. And it was kind of necessary to understand what's going on here. So these are the research questions. They're fairly basic because, you know, this is an environmental management program. If it was an MS ecology program, maybe these would be more specific, and I'll get into some more specific chemical scientific research opportunities in a later slide. But you can see here, really nice summary of some of the properties that the biochar has when it's mixed into soil. It adjusts pH, makes changes to the availability of nutrients in the soil. It has a high cation exchange capacity. So you can ask about what that is later. Also changes to bulk density, porosity, water holding capacity. So it sounds really cool. Improving the activity of soil microorganisms. It's like, wow, amazing. And you can even eat it and feed it to your cows. Some serious. Just real quick, these are some of the other really just incredible capacities that biochar has coming from the literature. Here's a summary of how heavy metals can be removed by from soils by biochars. Really cool stuff. Here's another one, advanced oxidation processes to treat different contaminants. Atrazine, you can treat atrazine in soil using corn stalks that are treated with zero valent NZVI, you know, and then you can go over to this paper here, Zhang et al. 2020, and you can be like, what is this? How does it work? And then it gets into this level of detail. So it's good stuff, or at least it has potential. Let's just say that, literally, potential energy. And so all of that played a role in creating this baseline measurement and soil sampling plan that was informed by the literature. Everything that we test for all came from the literature to figure out, well, what baseline conditions do we need to measure so that in the future we can see what the effect was. So we set up a study at the, did I say 2 minutes? Oh, okay. Well, I'm gonna have to speed up. So here's the research plot that we created at the Cold Harbor Ranch, testing different percentages of biochar in the soil. Here's what the research plots look like. We also set up a study at Gunnison Gardens. I'm sorry, let me go back. The Cold Harbor Ranch is a 340-acre regenerative research ranch that's in Gunnison, or just outside of Gunnison, and it's under an NRCS conservation easement. And so right over here is where the executive director, MJ, said, let's try biochar there and see what happens if we can grow some grass. We set up a study at Gunnison Gardens. This was an agricultural study where it was planted in this 100-foot bed where we planted Hackereye turnips. Here's some photos of the equipment that we purchased with my project partner, Jad. Here are the demonstrations that we did of making biochar. This one was at a summer solstice party last year, so there was actually some fire spinning going on around the kiln, which was super cool. And then here's very recently on the bottom right, that was at the Tualatin County landfill near Salt Lake City. This was at an event called Charpalooza. So if you grab one of those zines in the back, you can see more, you can study these different methods of making biochar, from low-cost backyard methods all the way up to industrial sewage sludge biochar making machines. So the zine ended up getting combined with the user's guide. The zine was intended to be a very easy to understand and non-scientific and very digestible and reproducible version of the deliverable. The literature review is like really long and complex, and so the zine was intended to be at the opposite end. I ended up combining the user's guide and the zine for a number of reasons. And so I made this video on YouTube where I told a story, 9 stories from the project meant to inspire interpretations, creative interpretations. And I said, don't worry about it being factually correct. You can totally interpret it and remix it, or you can make it exact if you want to. And so these were the 2 submissions that I received. Mila is here and Destin. I don't know if Destin's here, but both of them are in our school and they submitted these wonderful submissions, and they're both in the zine there in the back. So these are really, really cool opportunities for future research, just incredible stuff, really, really exciting. And we're talking to the wastewater treatment plant that makes the Gunny Gold biosolids compost about potentially including biochar, because the biochar does need to be charged with nutrients before, or at least advised to be charged before being used. And then we have these big piles of wood at the landfill, but there's still kind of an open question about if it's better to turn this into biochar and release all the methane at once, or let it slowly degrade over 100 or 200 years in our dry mountain climate. It's kind of an open question about that. If we're going to use the char for pollution remediation or soil carbon removal, or I'm sorry, soil carbon development, atmospheric carbon removal, then we might be able to do some life cycle assessment and be like, okay, well, the methane that we released from making the char is offset by the use of the char that we made. So kind of cool stuff. And yeah, acknowledgements. A ton of people were involved in this project. Literally everybody on this list were instrumental in making this project happen. Dr. Ricardo, Jad, everybody on the Cold Harbor team, Kate Clark for letting me in the door and being a champion, Jess Young as well. Everybody. We even have some people down here. Vihan is in Cape Town. Shout out Vihan, thank you. And here are the sources. And that's what I got. Thank you.
Questions? Is there any permitting or licensing that goes into having an operation like this? Or I know you mentioned like some backyard scale, like is there differences as you do more material, or just if you could speak to that?
Yeah, great question, Tristan. So the question is there any permitting, or do you have to tell anybody if you want to make biochar, and at what scale? So if you're just making it in your backyard and it's at the same scale as a campfire, then no. If you're making it at a larger scale, it's a really interesting question, because part of what we were doing at this event here at Charpalooza was, let's see if, I don't think there's any of them in this picture, but the Missoula Fire Research Center was here, and they came with their emissions testing equipment, where they put a device over the top of the kilns, and then they also captured some of the gases to take back to their lab to analyze. And the purpose for that was to try to make it easier to get smoke permit exemptions. So if you want to do it at a larger scale, there are smoke bans and burn bans that we're working on navigating within. So ideally, a kiln even like this does not have any smoke, maybe a little bit, but ideally it has no smoke at all. It does have the greenhouse gas emissions. However, what those smoke and burn bans are looking at are, I guess, both will it spread? And the answer is no, because there shouldn't be any embers coming out. And smoke ban, well, if we can prove that there's no smoke, then it can be a little easier to do it in the future. So.
Thank you.
I'll introduce our next presenter. Throughout our relationship and our friendship, we are investing our life energy into world peace and soil as the vehicle for world peace. Here's Jad now. He will be presenting on bridging the connection that's been lost between humans and soil.
Well, hello everyone. I just need to. This is me too. I think Matthew wanted to end with this picture. Okay, awesome. So this is my project title, Wonders of Biochar, a multidisciplinary approach to the uses of biochar. Okay, so I want to start with this picture. Here you can see the terra preta. So back in the day when scientists went to the Amazon rainforest to discover how did the ancient civilization lived there, they were expecting gold, but no, it was their soil. Their soil was their wealth. This was their treasure. Terra preta, well, it's deliberately engineered. This is not like naturally made. This is engineered and passed down from generation after generation. It took hundreds of years to make this what it is. So if you want to survive tomorrow, please remember the 5 ingredients of biochar: compost, animal manure, clay, bones too. You can see, here you can see the normal soil, which is kind of bland. And basically, every farmer in the world is here, and this is where we should be. We should develop soil that hosts enough biodiversity and life in it. So in this presentation, I'm going to talk about the story behind the char. What is soil erosion? What can we do? What I had to do, the laboratory adventures, the agricultural experiment, and finally, the global outreach survey. So what is soil erosion, if you're wondering? Soil erosion is a process that removes the upper layer of the soil from which plants get most of their nutrients and water from. Here you can see some pictures of soil erosion on coastal lines and even in mountain areas. Yes, so echoes from the 1990s. I intentionally added these old pictures or graphs from the World Resource Institute in the Netherlands, just to highlight that this problem has been going on for a long, long time. You can see the pictures are bad enough. Can you imagine them now? They're so much worse. So we need to do something. What are the causes of soil degradation from soil erosion? First of all, natural factors. We have strong winds and heavy rains, which we all know that they're being they become intensified and unpredictable. Other human activities, of course, inappropriate agricultural land management like monocropping and heavy use of pesticides, deforestation for expansion, overgrazing. We need more cattle because people want to eat more meat. Mining activities, everyone wants to mine everything, everywhere. Plus land disturbances at construction sites. If you remember, like when you look through a construction site, the land around it is extremely damaged. So the effects that goes with these combined causes is the loss of fertile topsoil. If the fertile topsoil is lost, we have lower agricultural production, decreased food quality, and decreased food security too. Even furthermore, environmental and water resources, there's going to be loss of biodiversity, reduced water quality, and the death of aquatic life. Other effects that we regularly see on the news are the amplified risks of landslides and floods, infrastructure damage, and the displacement of populations. So what can we do? This is the question. Firstly, we need to rethink our tactics towards conservation in agriculture. We can see here on the right, these two concepts, precision conservation and precision agriculture. These are not new concepts. These concepts were utilized by ancient civilizations for thousands of years. We're just reminding ourselves. Even more, I can tell you, we can replace precision with conscious conservation, conscious agriculture, in order to incorporate all the elements that makes soil fertile and healthy in what it is. If we do that, if we follow these two processes, we'd be better, we'd be more efficient with our resources, or the optimization of water, fertilizer, and pesticides usage. We can increase crop yields and reduce waste. Environmental protection, of course. If we reduce the harmful effects, the harmful usage of chemicals in farming projects, we can help prevent soil erosion, water pollution, and protect biodiversity, as well as cost effectiveness in an industrial scale, optimize the resource usage and reduce waste to help farmers increase their profits and make their projects even more sustainable. Climate change mitigation, it's on a global scale. If we use precision farming techniques, we can reduce tilling and other carbon releasing practices. Finally, improved crop quality, and this is what we really need, desperately need. If we do these, if we abide by these concepts, we can produce higher quality crops with longer shelf life and resistant to pests and disease. So what is biochar? We said like 1,000 times. Basically, biochar is collecting biomass such as wood chips, tree leaves, or anything else, and exposing this biomass to extreme high temperatures between 500 degrees Celsius to 1,000 degrees Celsius in an oxygen-deprived environment. This is called the pyrolysis method. And after some time, we get biochar. Biochar has some amazing characteristics. It can absorb heavy metals and other organic contaminants, even pharmaceutical chemicals and salts. Here you can see some pictures producing biochar with my project partner, Matthew, at the Sanctuary Somatics. So what I had to do, I love this picture. This picture was taken inside the greenhouse at the Chipita Garden. So I had to set up a soil and water laboratory at the Clark School facility. I had to ensure continuation for the project by creating a monitoring plan plus a video directory on how to use the testing kits. I had to do an agricultural experiment too, using biochar for the Organics Guild in hopes to create some cold climate gardening strategies. And finally, a global outreach survey as an effort to collect the experiences and ideas on the uses and production of biochar from biochar users around the world. So you can see the Lamot test kits. We bought these test kits with our combined grants. Now they're at the Clark School facility. So after taking 16 samples from the Cold Harbor Ranch, we wanted to test the soils ourselves, as well as sending the samples elsewhere so we can compare the results together. By doing this, this highlighted for us what needs to be done in the future, what needs to be reconsidered and avoided. Plus, by setting up the baseline measurements for the soil test, we can now measure the progress throughout the years. So project continuation when it comes to biochar is essential. So I had to video record the chemical testing procedures using the Lamot test kits for future students so they know how to use it efficiently. We also recorded and saved our baseline data and findings online and on a laboratory binder, so students have access to both digital and physical records, plus a monitoring plan for the upcoming years. This was my quick agricultural experiment I did, my 45-day agricultural experiment. So what did the radishes show us? The purpose for this experiment is to compare the growth rate with different biochar percentages mixed with soil. There were 4 treatments, 0%, 3%, 6%, and 10% with 3 replicates of each. So during our findings, here you can see the picture on the bottom, the 10% biochar created nutrient stress for the plant. It was the worst one between all of them. The 3% one was the best. You can see in the picture, they're flourishing. And water retention peaked with the right ratio of soil to water to biochar. 6% was the best. It retained water tremendously. So what are the new strategies that surfaced after all of this? So the best way to use biochar, in my opinion, is to take the amount of biochar that you want to apply and divide it by 2, put half on the root layer and the other half on the topsoil in order to maximize the biochar's characteristics and efficiency. Even for cold climate gardening, like here in Gunnison, applying small amounts of biochar on top of the snow in the last snow weeks, it will speed up the melting procedure, thus increase in growing days. Just for your information, biochar takes around 3 years to degrade like 10%, but mixing it with compost tea, which is organic fertilizer, liquid form, or bokashi, which is organic, fermented organic matter, it speeds up the integration and it increases vegetation density as well as water holding capacity. So the need for a global outreach survey. You know, the youth are going to inherit everything we do today, so it's important. Here, according to the studies, the biochar market is growing and it's projected to hit 484 million by 2030. That's why I saw great value in connecting with biochar users around the world. And by doing this, this helped us identify knowledge gaps for future soil remediation projects. So here are some of the survey answers I got from this outreach. First of all, from the Jordan Biochar Research Initiative, GBRI. They're located in Jordan. It's in the Middle East. They produce biochar from locally sourced feedstock in the Jordan Valley, and they test with different pyrolysis conditions. They're also interested in waste management and soil amendments to produce land productivity in arid and semi-arid environments, which is greatly needed in the Middle East. They are currently researching the potential for biochar to enhance growth performance of wheat and barley in rain conditions. And yeah, in rain-fed conditions. That's interesting. More ideas. The second answer we got from Green Man Char. They're located in Melbourne, Australia. They also produce their biochar from local feedstock. Their main concern is about ensuring how biochar producers store their feedstock sustainably without contributing to deforestation or unsustainable practices. The owner is also interested in ways to encourage governments at all levels to use biochar in large-scale landscaping and development projects. This is seen in a way to promote carbon storage and improve environmental outcomes. Before finishing up, I have to say thank you to my project partner, Matthew Eshed, Dr. Jesse Baker too, Dr. Kate Clark, my community sponsor, the Cold Harbor Institute, all of the MEM faculty, the IPLM grant, the survey participants, and the chemistry department too. Thank you.
Questions? Courtney?
So it seems like there's kind of people on one side where like companies are taking advantage of the excitement around biochar and really focusing on like agricultural yields, but then are often not sourcing their feed sources sustainably and really being very like precise with percentages of materials. And then kind of on the other hand, people who are using biochar to, you know, take advantage of things like the wood left over of wildfires, but it's not necessarily in like great percentages to be used for, you know, increasing agricultural yields and things. So where do you think between those two attention should really be focused?
Wow, that was a long question. If I want to summarize the question, it would be that some people are locally sourcing the feedstocks, some are mixing the feedstocks up, but how can we ensure that it's locally sourced and sustainably sourced, right? Answering your question, I think that the biggest part of building soil is giving it love. This is what we have to remember. Soil needs love, it needs taken care of, and it needs time and to get passed down from generation and generation. I think one way to characterize it is everything green, you can make a fertilizer from it, and everything that's dead, like dead wood or something, it's best to make biochar from it. Yeah.
We need to move to our panel questions. So now we have the opportunity to address additional questions to any of the individuals on the panel or to the group as a whole. Who would like to start us off?
For the biochar group, did you guys find, or can you speak to, does one type of material make quote unquote better quality biochar than another? Or does it all end up with like the end product is the same? Does that make sense?
Yeah, does the feedstock influence the end product of the biochar. Yeah, so definitely. I didn't include any scanning electron microscope photos in the presentation, but you're gasifying your biomass. So if you do it with sewage sludge, the scanning electron microscope images are going to show little kind of beads. If you do it with wood, it's going to show those long, I don't know, plant scientists in the room, what are those long things that are like the wood is made out of, where the water and nutrients? Yeah, that. But that's what you'll see. It'll be like these honeycomb structures that are actually those structures that are inside the wood. So you're going to get different characteristics. Also, the temperature that you're pyrolyzing it at will influence it. So it's all in the literature. So I would say like work from what's your feedstock, what's your use that you want to use it for, and then you can optimize.
Thank you.
Peyton.
Also for the biochar group, how does biochar compare to other traditional compost methods? Like, is that burning worth it?
Well,
You wanna share this? We can share the answer. So the question is, biochar, compost, how do they relate? So biochar itself does not really have nutrients in it. If it's made from manure, it will have minerals and more minerals in it. If it's made from wood, it's going to be just like carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen. So it goes with compost. Generally, it wants to be activated or charged.
Yeah, one thing I want to add is that when you add carbon to a certain environment, the CNC cation exchange capacity increases, and this is how the molecules behave in soil. So the higher the CNC and more nutrients that are available, the better that it's going to be transformed into fulvic acid, so the plants can absorb it even faster.
who else has a question? Please.
What do you think would be the most common misunderstanding after you share these really awesome details about biochar? Like, what's something that you've seen people misunderstand most frequently around using it and just integrating it into their lives in whatever way?
Can I make it a question for all of us? Can I make that a question for what do people commonly misunderstand about all of ours? Does that sound good? Yeah. Yeah. So the question is like what, I guess, what are effective ways to communicate what we're working on so that things aren't misunderstood? Does that sound like a good interpretation?
Go for it.
Cool. Yeah. Do you want to? When do you want to?
Take that as the mic wants to be handed off. Okay. Oh gosh. Okay. Misunderstood about my project or the work that I'm doing. Yeah, I think something I would love to dive into for hours with you guys would be the balance between Western science and research and like cultural knowledge as ways of learning about the world. Through a lot of my conversations, and I think a lot of us, see this in the classroom, see this at our work, but like there's kind of been a hierarchy placed on what knowledge is most valuable and how it should be used. And the unfortunate truth to that is like that's not how a lot of the world and a lot of cultures work and how they've learned about the environment in the first place and like created sustainability practices. Even Jad was talking about like how this understanding of biochar in the soil was from like ancient civilizations. And so I think the greatest misunderstanding or, about my project is like, why do we need to learn about reciprocity? Like, why do we need to learn about this? Like, we have all this information available, but it's clear to us that with environmental degradation and climate change and everything, like we have all these resources and we're still not using them to the best of our ability. And I just firmly, personally believe that a lot of that stems from our relationships, but not just with like the natural world, but people and communities, and like how do we balance all these different types of knowledge. So creating more of a horizontal structure rather than a hierarchy, I think will make things more inclusive, make it easier to collaborate, make it easier to understand one another and the world that we live in. But yeah, like I said, I could go on about this for hours, but I won't.
Yeah, I would just build off of that. I think that communication is essential for the foundation of all of these projects. And I know for mine, it's kind of that sharing of knowledge, like Leo was discussing, that it's not for us, like I'm not an outsider coming in telling someone what they should do with their property, but I'm learning about what they're already doing and how we can move forward together to promote soil health, because farmers and ranchers want their soil to be healthy too, you know? Like the goal is to optimize things for the earth and for the people together.
So I would say I think that one of the big misunderstandings or things that maybe that doesn't feel like exactly the right word, but that has come up recently is that there is a use, or that at least for biochar companies that there's a customer. I think that I've found that there's still a lot of work to be done in applying it. There's a lot of aspects like that black carbon dust is really bad to breathe in. So if you're and it can spontaneously combust. So if you're transporting it, you don't want to breathe it. You don't want it to spontaneously combust. How wet does it need to be? Are you selling it based on dry weight or wet weight? What are you using it for? Where are you charging it? All of those things are related to if there's an off-taker or a buyer or a user, and that's kind of at the commercial scale, and to some degree applies at the household scale as well, or community scale.
Okay, 30 seconds. So one thing that comes to my mind as a misconception with biochar is that making biochar for carbon sequestration or carbon storage by itself. Making biochar is half the step. This is half the thing. The full spectrum or the full cycle of it is planting seeds, more vegetation on the surface, for the biochar to get integrated into the soil with water, with weather events, all of that. So being limited just making biochar for the purpose of carbon sequestration by itself is illogical to me. We need more plants.
Let's thank these graduates.